Okay, I'm going to share my screen, screen number 2. We would like to start with a couple of announcements. First of all, happy hour. So this Friday, so please don't forget, 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the regular Zoom link and password. So join in with a beverage. You can bring coffee, tea, something stronger. It's a happy hour for you. And we apologize in advance for Catalyst. Catalyst is a new thing for us, for you, for StarTalk, and I've realized that I made a mistake on Monday when I was talking about this, but this is how it should look like. So this is, and if you uploaded your evidence somewhere else, that's totally fine. It's I apologize. It's for this, but this is where it should go. Okay, so portfolio cover sheet should go under planning. I think that's all set. So but this one is a little bit different, just a little bit. Group oral production task goes under PF1, so performance and feedback right here. And multimodal assessment is optional, but if you want to do multimodal, this should also go under PF1, performance and feedback. Your self-assessments will go under PF5, and under learning tools, you will post your rubrics for group oral production task and multimodal assessment. And multimodal assessment is, again, is optional. So this is how it should be ideally done. And we understand it's, if you did it differently, that's fine. But but this is how it should be done. So I apologize for this. And it's a new thing for us. So how is it going? And I know not many of you have uploaded this or this. So is it going fine for everyone? Catalyst, everything is good. And again, if you have any questions about Catalyst, happy hour is for you. Okay. And we will talk about self-assessment now. I'm gonna, Paula, I'm gonna stop sharing right now.
Now you can hear me, right? So what I'm going to do is talk about self-assessment and show you a couple of the tools. So let me go into the view. There we go. Now that should be full screen. Is that good? Liz, does that look good for everyone? Awesome. Great. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to follow the StarTalk steps, 3-step process in looking at self-assessments. We're going to acquire the templates and take a look at them, and that will be processing what the templates have to offer. And I will also have you take a Google form self-assessment based on one of your 10 statements that one of you prepared for our class. Then what we're going to ask you to do this week is to apply and use the templates as part of the StarTalk CLAP program. So if what I want you to do is dip into your portfolio folder. And I'm going to show that to you right now. I'll go into the portfolio folder to show you, and then I'll come back to this to show you what it is that I want you to take a look at. Remember, in your portfolio, in the StarTalk CLAP materials for teacher participants, we have all of the different portfolio folders. And so I'll go into Svetlana's just as a demonstration. So if you go into Svetlana's, what you will see now are 2 new templates or portfolio components that are there for you to use, and they're to assist you in making your self-assessment. So in portfolio component number 6, you were to identify 10 can-do statements that are tied to your fall 2021 course. Then what we have are 2 different assessment templates. One to create a self-assessment using MS Word, and one to create a self-assessment using Google Forms. You can do one or the either or both, depending on how you view you might deliver your self-assessment to your students in fall 2021. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, and what I want you to do is go download the MS Word self-assessment template onto your computer. And I'm going to put you into small groups randomly, and I want you to take 5 to 8 minutes to look over the self-assessment MS Word document in your randomly assigned group. And Liz, I'll ask you to put these questions in the chat. What do you like about it, and what do you not like about it? And could you use it after you change or adapt it for your classroom and for your level using your can-do statements? So download it from the Google Drive folder, because if you open it in Google Drive, some of the Microsoft Word features will get stripped out. And that's okay, because you can replace them. But if it looks a little different than the circles and the squares, that's because Google doesn't actually support those. But if you download the MS Word document version, it should work. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions before we launch you into groups? And they can be randomly assigned.
Yeah, I have a question. Well, I'm sorry, I just want to understand better. So this assessment would be for the teacher or is it like as a lesson, like introducing yourself for a student?
So this would be something that you would give to your students to gauge how well they can already do the various tasks at the beginning of the semester. So let's say you have identified 10 can-do speaking tasks for your course. Then you would give this self-assessment to your students at the beginning of the semester, maybe at the middle, but also at the end, to track their own perceived learning of the tasks that you teach. So this is for students. And what you'll do when you read through it is you'll see that I have a recommended scoring suggestion. And I say that this type of self-assessment works best when it's just a participation score. When they take it, they think about what it is that you will be teaching. And then you can also discuss it with the students afterwards, like say, are you excited about these tasks? Which of these 10 tasks sounds the most interesting to you? And I threw in I feel this is important to me, to my family, or for my learning or my future, so that you can get a sense, if you give this in the beginning and at the end, what tasks are most important to the students and for what reasons. It can give you more information. So this is a template because you can change it. You know, thinking of Luke and his middle school students, maybe this level of directions is not appropriate. Something simpler is what he would want. The statements themselves might be very different. Maybe you want to do one for the whole year, so you'll want 20 statements rather than just 10. That would be fine. You would take this and adapt it for your purposes. Okay. So any other questions before we go into groups? All right, Liz, could you go ahead and put us into randomly assigned groups? And then what you'll do is talk about the questions that Liz will also put in the chat.
Hey.
أهلين يا سماح, welcome back.
Ahlin. So just a quick question.
Yes.
About the assignment we did today. So if I am counting the assignment as speaking, the one that we did today, what was it? Forgot, number 6. So if I am choosing speaking, and we have 2 choices, like we have the group oral or we have the
The multimodal assessment.
Multimodal assessment. So which one should I choose for the speaking? Like the task is not like conversation or pair work or something. The task is I will describe my house, for example. So it doesn't go with like a group oral, right?
No, I would say it would go, yeah, it would go for some type of presentation, like the students design a poster, with pictures of their house or collage, and then they—
Which would work well with multimodal assessment.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something we were trying to do with template number 6, is if you have these 10, start thinking of, okay, how would they practice that? How would I have them practice that in the classroom? Or, you know, when you assign a multimodal assessment, they will put it together for homework. But all of that is practice, which drives language acquisition. And then how will I assess it is that rubric where you put in the things that are important to you at that stage of the curriculum and for that linguistic task and communication task. So yeah, each of these I think could be done either in a group oral or paired oral if you only have 2 people, or with some type of multimodal presentational speaking task, and get through these different things in different ways in the semester. Great. There were great, Mona, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. The semester is basically 13 weeks, and we have here 10 can-do statements. So am I going to assume that this is going to be almost a week by week? Incrementally, the growth is a weekly growth, or?
It could be, and you could add more or have fewer. It could be the big tasks that you end up assessing through either multimodal assessments or group orals. Yeah, it's up to you. It's very flexible. But the nice thing that I think it kind of is if you give this twice, at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester, or at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, you can chart growth on these. You can also find out what's important to students at the beginning of the semester. Does it change by the end of the semester? It's a preview to them of look at all these things that we're going to learn this year or this semester. And then you ask them at the end of the year, did you learn these things? And they may be surprised. They will see their own growth or be able to gauge it. And that's exciting, you know, it's kind of a nice thing. Any other questions before I move to the next slide?
I have a question because I was a little bit confused and when I had and did this assignment already. And the instructions just great. I did the Google form and I just couldn't figure out how to do the second grid. So if I want to put this, it's important to me, like to my teachers, whatever it is. So how to do that? Because I couldn't figure it out.
Okay. So do you mean how to score it or how to actually get it on the
How to put it in? Because right now I just have my can-do statement. So if we're looking at that template right now, I have the first 2 columns, but not the third one.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can add it, and if you are doing it in Google Forms, I'll show you in a little bit of how to do it. Or we can meet in my office hours too, and I can take a personal look at yours and see.
Yeah, it just why I asked this question because it can be for everyone to know, and it's not in the instructions. So in the instructions, how to add the multiple grid, but then how to add the second one, it's
okay.
Yeah,
we can talk about that online. If you do an online assessment using Google Forms or using SurveyMonkey, you can't do them side by side. You can do that in Qualtrics, which is another software that we used for the larger, but I'm going to show you in a minute how you can do it. This is on paper, which works really well. You can do whatever you want, but online it's a little bit trickier where you have to separate them. And I'll show you that in a second. One of the good suggestions in the group I heard was a recommendation perhaps to leave one of these blank and to let students add in something and then discuss whether or not it's feasible in the class. Another suggestion was to turn the entire survey landscape and allow for text boxes at the end where they could write their own comments about things. So there were a lot of discussions. Anything in your groups that came up that was really interesting?
I added singing to my activity. That's the second week they sing happy birthday in Arabic. So
that's great. Yeah, adding and customizing these is key. Tying these 10 statements to your actual curriculum. We also talked about what if I'm a novice teacher? I don't know really what we're going to be able to do. I'm building the curriculum as I go along. That's true. Start making an inventory of the tasks that you do and build this over a year or two, because it gets easier, and there's a calibration between you and your curriculum and the students and their ability level that'll take some time to get this calibrated right with the tasks that you're teaching and that the students are demonstrating success in. So yeah, I do think it takes some time to put these together. What I have for you also is I'm
sorry for interrupting. I have a quick question. So in terms of the order of the items, does it matter what comes first or last in terms of more difficult or easiest? So the thing that got my attention in this order, for example, number 3, which is I can discuss my daily routine. Is it number 3 or number 4? But one of them was talking about the daily routine. The daily routine is, and actually school schedule as well, is way more difficult, and it might be intermediate high compared to the one that talks about food, number 7. Because number 7, he basically will do a list, which is a novice skill. I love pizza, pasta, It's just doing a list, which is novice level. But talking about daily routine is basically like intermediate high, sometimes advanced low, in between. So does it matter, in your opinion, the order of putting them?
If it matters to you, it matters, yes. And I think you're right. These are untested. So something you might find is that you should put these either in the order that they're taught in the class, so it's symmetrical, so that makes sense. And probably the order that you teach them is also in the order of difficulty. The easier ones will be first and the harder ones will be later. So I think it makes the most logical sense to put them in the order that works for your class and matches how you teach them. It's a great question. Yeah, and you might, as you teach, realize, hey, this one in the middle is actually too hard. I need to move it to the end. Why does my textbook have it in the middle? Well, then you might find there's some order of acquisition issues in the textbook, and then you can ponder and solve that issue as you see fit. So what I have in your resources folder, and I also have some of the information about this in your portfolio too, is I have the same self-assessment but in Google Forms. So we polled you last week, and a lot of you have told us that you would be interested in delivering a self-assessment over Google Forms. So what I want you to do now is get into new randomly assigned groups for about the same amount of time and try out the Google form. And the questions are, what do you like about it and what do you not like about it? Could you use it after you change or adapt it? And what questions do you have for creating it in Google Forms? So it's almost exactly the same, just in a different delivery format. So Liz, if you could do 2 things, if you could put the link in the chat and also the questions in the chat, and then randomly assign groups again, and maybe a little bit bigger groups. I think we had 3 people in our group, so something bigger would be great. All right, welcome back everyone. We had a lot of great discussions in our group about some of the things that people said was if you're teaching first semester, to really simplify this, that the can-do should match what's going to be taught in the class and not beyond. You don't want to scare people or put too much stress on them. One of the instructors talked about maybe not doing this during the first semester, but starting it in the second year. Any other points that you all brought up in your groups that were interesting?
Yeah, I want to ask about a point that was brought in the first group that I was in. It's like when the students, for example, do the first time assessment, they might think that they know all of those points. That, like, for example, if they know, one of the teachers suggested that, or talked about this, that they might try that I can do this, but they cannot do it. But their imagination, or they think that they can do this. So wouldn't that be like when they do the assessment for the next time or the third time, wouldn't that be like a negative start for them, or they would feel like I didn't do that? Or what then is the point of the assessment if they might put everything or half of the things that I can do it, but they basically cannot do any of these things?
Right, right. I know what you mean. And it's not negative growth. If they overinflate what they can do in the beginning. I guess what you could do is, what happens is, let's say we give this at the beginning of the semester, and then we collect evidence through group orals, and we collect evidence through multimodal presentational speaking tasks on whether they can do these things, and have them self-assess at the end. What we see in a lot of the literature on motivation, and researchers say that the self-assessment process is helpful to the students become realistic language learners, goal-oriented, and it helps them gauge their own capabilities. It just makes them agents in the learning process. So yes, it may be that they're not good at it in the beginning, and that's okay. And that's also why it's important not to use the scores from the self-assessment for any grading. More it's participation, discussion, talking about our learning goals, kind of solidifying our class expectations, setting up community norms, like these are the things that we're going to work on. This is a communicative oriented class. These are our goals and tasks. So it's more of the psychological end of it in a guidepost, rather than accuracy and self-assessment is not the main goal, especially with some of our learners, if that makes sense. Any other questions about that?
I wanted to add that the part about importance, is this important to you, I think could be used, doesn't matter which semester it is. I think it's always relevant. It's something I would always keep, and I haven't been doing in the past, and I will start doing it from now on. I love the levels of importance to family future in general. I will plan to keep that. The one thing to add to what Ayman was saying, and something that I've been doing that I found useful, is measuring like how well someone can do. We were talking about this in our breakout room, like what does well mean?
Mm-hmm.
What I have my own students do is record themselves a very short, less than 10-second video actually doing this task, and it lives in a Google Drive. And so the kids can see their progress in the beginning of the second semester and at the end of the second semester, and compare their growth in something that's concrete in a personal video that no one has access to but themselves. So that kind of addresses that problem for us at the high school level.
Okay, great.
Building on what you just said, I was going to say a little bit more descriptive in how well I can do, would do better. For example, I would do well for our context. I can introduce myself and my family to my peers in 2 to 3 sentences, in 2 to 3 simple sentences. I can introduce, so that now we're measuring.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Or for beginner, in 1 sentence, I can introduce myself. If you advance, I can talk a little more. In 3 to 5 sentences, I can blah, blah, short sentences, or I can give more detail in 1 complex sentence. Now it's measuring at the same time.
Yeah, and it's setting more clear parameters around the can-do task. That's nice. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to show is in Google Forms, the 2 different ways of collecting this data. So I put this question twice. I can tell people about my daily routine. I can tell people about my daily routine, because when you look at the results, I'll go back and look at the results, the responses. These responses are automatically put into a Google Excel spreadsheet or Google spreadsheet. If you used the first type of question, it gives you the number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. But if you use the radio buttons, it actually spits out the text itself, and you might have to do a find and replace if you wanted to score those. So that was just to show you a little bit that these different types of question formats actually then, this one is the numerical data that shows up in the Google form, and these ones actually print out the statements themselves. So when you think about how you might want to get that data, if it's important to you, using this ahead of time and knowing that ahead of time can be helpful. So something that I did is in each of your portfolios is I put an information sheet. let's see, I'll go into Islam's just to show you. It's the number 7 can-do self-assessment Google form creation direction sheet. So if you open that, it's all of the directions that you need to take your 10 statements and put them into Google Forms if you want to use Google Forms for this, but you haven't done it yet. And I'm going to let you have that resource on your own. But what I've done is I've put in the directions along with images of what it looks like step by step. And that will also give you the information on using a linear scale and what this looks like if you use the linear scale instead of the multiple choice, which is the default, or using the multiple choice grid, which is the second type of format. It looks like this when you put it in, and then the result when you run the assessment is like this. So this direction sheet, let you download that on your own and use it. There's also a lot of videos and tutorials on using Google Forms, using Likert scales in Google Forms, because the idea is you can create your self-assessment either using the MS Word template or by using the Google Forms directions and putting it in Google Forms. So what I'm going to do now is see if there's any last questions before we turn this over to Dima, who will be talking about what we're doing on Monday and also some more information for you about assessment. If there are any questions, you can put them in the chat or go ahead and speak out while Dima, you can take over the screen. Yeah, I see, Luke, there's something for you about coloring in a bar. That is an option in some forms. A slider bar is an option in some of the different online assessments. Or yeah, on paper too, just coloring it or circling faces from sad to happy is really a nice thing. All right, Dima, why don't you go ahead and take over?
Thank you, Paula. So first of all, let's talk about our plan for next week. So this will be our last week of our summer workshop. Yay. So what we are planning to do for Monday, this will be your first demonstration. For hour 1, you will need to showcase one assessment instrument in task-specific breakout rooms, task-specific, and get peer feedback. So task-specific means that we will put you in breakout rooms based on your tasks. For example, if Svetlana and Iman want to do multimodal assessment, you'll be put in one group, okay? And let's start with this one. And actually, you will do a Google form, and this is how it looks like. I'm gonna send it to you in the chat. There are just 2 questions. So what is your name? And on Monday of next week, I would most like to showcase to my peers the following item. So I'm gonna put it in the chat. So please fill out this Google form, if I find the chat.
And if there's any trouble with access, I'll do the same as I did before and make sure people have access.
Yeah, I put it in the chat, so is it possible to change your, yeah, you can change your mind between before Monday, but please let us know because we will put you in breakout rooms for task-specific breakout rooms. Yes. So are we good? It's not a very long form, so we're good. Okay, so what you will do, task-specific breakout rooms, and each of you will have 10 to 15 minutes approximately to showcase what you have. You can just do it, or you can just show it and talk about it and describe your plan to your peers. Yeah, that's the plan. And for the second hour, it's going to be another happy hour. Well, kind of happy. So this is when you can ask your questions about assessments. And I want to do an activity that Sean did last week with the chat. So let's brainstorm. So put the questions that you still have about assessment in the chat. Yeah, Paul, you had a...
I just wanted to note that only 16 people have responded so far to the survey, so make sure you hit the submit button. And if you are nervous that you won't have one completed, but there's one of the 3 that you're most interested in, go ahead and select that, because it's okay if you get put in a group and you're not quite done. You can show what you have been able to do, or even say, I just want to see what you all have done. It's okay. It's a very democratic and free world. So I was worried with just having 16 responses if maybe 4 of you weren't sure what to do. So feel free.
Flexibility. It's all about flexibility, right? And yeah, and right now, just put your, and we will save your questions, and we'll try to address them during the second hour on Monday. So please put your questions in the chat. Questions, any questions about assessments?
Yeah, can I ask? So what exactly we want to do is that you want to get an assessment. For example, if I pick the presentational, so I want to make an assessment that I want to make my students make a presentation about something according to their level, and then what are my criteria that I want to assess them according to, right? Okay.
Yeah, you can just show to your peers, just show, this is my task, this is my rubric, what do you think? So this is an opportunity for peer feedback. So we have, yeah, good question, Iman, thank you. And so we're having some, how will we pick it up in the fall? Yeah, we will make an announcement about it in the fall. So you will finalize your assessments and then you will try them in the fall. Yeah, that's the idea.
That's a great idea. And we can spend more time during happy hour 2 on Monday, June 28th, going over that in more detail.
Any questions about assessment? You can also email us, or if you don't have any urgent questions at this point.
So my question is about the self-assessment. Should we create it via Google form? Would that be okay? Or do you want
okay. Yeah, you can make it via Google Forms or use the MS Word template. But great, that'd be a really nice thing. So if you want to try out and put your self-assessment in Google Forms, you can come to Friday office hours if you get stuck or have any questions. We'll be here early. We're always here at 15 minutes before the 6 p.m. start. So even if you need a little bit of help on Monday evening at 5:45, you can jump in and we can help you tweak. You can share your screen or if you are stuck, and then you would showcase it to your peers and maybe have them try it out and give you feedback.
And I think we're getting some questions already, but please feel free to bring your questions on Monday. We'll try to figure out what's going on. Okay. So, and the next day, the next big day next week is Wednesday, June 30th. So portfolio demonstration 2. So after this session here, task-specific breakout rooms, you will get some feedback and you'll be able to improve your assessments even more. And you can showcase them again on Wednesday in language-specific groups. And you can also use it in the target language. So how you will actually be teaching these, how you'll be assessing your students in the fall. So this is what we're doing on Wednesday. And again, each of you will have 10 to 15 minutes. So that's the plan for next week. Do you have any questions about this?
Yes, please. So when I talk about the assessment, do I need to bring anything like a lesson plan or anything about the topic that I'm explaining to the students? So, for example, even if the teachers of the other target language would understand what I'm talking about in any simple way, or just about the assessment itself, nothing related to anything that I'm explaining to the students?
It may be helpful to kind of briefly introduce your context, so what you are doing and why you're doing this, because it may be very different, right? Multimodal assessment for middle school Arabic and the university Russian students. Yes, I would like briefly introduce the context. Yeah, good question, Iman. Yeah. Any other questions? So we honestly don't have much time left. I think we will probably stop here, but if you want to learn about things like explicit and implicit knowledge and assessment, You can always stop by our office hour and we'll be happy to show you some cool stuff about explicit-implicit learning and implicit-explicit assessment, because we have 3 tools and all of them tap into different types of knowledge, right? So you have group oral production task, which is more implicit, and multimodal, which is more explicit, and self-assessment, which is super explicit. So we'll be happy to talk about this. We don't have time now, but we'll be happy to go back to it on Friday or during our office hours, or maybe even next week if you have any questions about this. So we have some materials, and just very quickly, we also have, in addition to the slides, we also have some resources for you. We can talk about grammar too, the elephant in the room. Some of you asked about how to actually do multimodal assessment, and we have in the resource folder, we have some instructions how to do it for free in PowerPoint, and some other resources for you to do multimodal assessment. I don't know if PowerPoint necessarily works for middle school children, but for university students, maybe high school students, it would work. So sorry we didn't have time to go over everything, but we tried our best. So, and if you have any questions about this, reviews of the slides, and stop by our office hour on Friday. We're going to take a break from now.
Yeah, so we're taking a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we have 2 guest speakers, and these are people who will be with us next week as well. Jason Merrill, who's a professor of Russian here at Michigan State University and at Middlebury College in Vermont, and also Ayman Mohamed, who's a professor of Arabic here at Michigan State University. And they are each going to be giving a presentation for half an hour after we come back at 7 p.m. So go ahead and take a break.
Unless I can show you where the recordings are if you want to see them really quickly. Or Dima, if you're sharing your screen, you can get that up.
Let me do it because I'm sharing it already. So you are here, and Liz, the recordings are here, right? In the slides.
So some of the start with the, I think she wants something from the first week.
Yeah, so if you can go here. Yeah. So this is the recording, right?
Okay, so it's in the same folder, in our big folder.
Yeah, everything is in the same folder. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still working on the most recent ones, but the one that you wanted specifically is there.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. And Dima and Paula, I recorded the questions and I put them in the notes section of that same slide, as well as in a comment, so we can reference them when we plan Monday.
Awesome, thank you, Liz.
Can I ask something, please?
Of course.
Well, for us, when we do assessment, we do not go too much in detail. So of what I have learned now. So at some points when I try to read or do it, I feel like a little bit of confused or things are overlapping. So in order to be sure that I understand everything and I didn't miss or stop that into learning that I have. So what should I do from here to next Monday to be sure, if I have any questions, or what is the best advice you give me? Because it's first time I go deep in the assessment ways or types. So I kind of feel
you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, you are.
Thank you.
So Ayman, I would ask, of the 3 different assessments that we've been trying to showcase and teach during this STARTALK CLAP workshop, the things that we're focusing on, the group orals, multimodal presentational speaking, and the self-assessment, which of the 3 do you want to spend more time on? Which one do you think would be most useful for you and for your students?
I love the presentational.
So maybe choose the presentational speaking, and then when you get together with your peer group, you'll get to see all the other examples of people who have done the same one. It might give you some good insights to see your peers and what they've done. You can give them feedback, and then you can showcase your presentational speaking task and get feedback from your peers.
And Ayman, that might work well as well with, I know your curriculum is really leans more heavily towards reading and writing and less so on speaking and listening, but the multimodal assessment could be a nice way to kind of bridge those skills and bring them together.
Exactly. That's a great point, Liz. So it's like multimodal is reading, could be writing, could be speaking. So yeah, that's a good
All together, yeah.
Yeah, all together.
So I applied for the presentational, then I'll change for the multimodal. Will be better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course, no, and like I said, you are doing a wonderful job. I mean, I know it's a tall order to try to incorporate all of this in one short period of time, and hopefully this is what the fall semester can be like, catching up, really having some time to look at your curriculum as you're planning it, and then think about where these assessments can fit in, tweaking them accordingly. And we'll have office hours as well during the fall. So this is just the beginning.
That's good. Thank you so much.
Even before the fall, you can always email us, and if you have any questions, we are super excited about this. Just let us know. We always respond. Yeah.
I will definitely do. I'll keep in touch with you. Thank you.
So it looks like it's 7 o'clock by my clock, and I see who is going first. Liz and Dima, can you remind me? We've got Ayman's here, and Jason, I saw he was here too. Ah, great.
I believe Jason will be going first, and so I'll give the virtual microphone over to Dima to introduce him. And he's known already. We've talked about him a little bit within this circle. So all good, all good.
I didn't do it.
You didn't do it, yeah. I just want to briefly introduce Dr. Jason Merrill, whom probably everyone knows, Dr. Jason Merrill. So Dr. Merrill is a professor of Russian at Michigan State University, and he's also served as the director of the Middlebury College Catherine Wasserman School of Russian since 2010, and he received his PhD in Russian literature from the University of Kansas, and he currently teaches Russian literature, Russian translation, Russian cinema. He has co-authored several Russian textbooks, and Jason has been a wonderful mentor for all of us in applied linguistics and the Russian studies, and I'm also very lucky to have Jason on my dissertation committee. And I just want to use this opportunity to say thank you. Spasibo, Jason, for all your guidance and all your help over the years. Thank you so much. And without further ado, please welcome Dr. Jason Merrill.
Hey, well, Dima, thank you very, very much. That was far too kind. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say that it's quite an honor to be invited here to be able to speak to this wonderful group. It's always great to talk to enthusiastic language instructors like you. And I have a total of 20 minutes for talking. So let's get started right away, because I do definitely want to leave some time for discussion and questions and just hearing from you at the end. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about placement testing here. Let's, pretending that this is sort of like a language class, but we don't have enough time, let's use the chat instead. Okay, everybody get ready to write. And in the chat, the first question is, what is placement testing? Write your answer to number 1. Go. There are no right or wrong answers. I say placement testing and you say boom, boom. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Good, good, good. So far, everybody seems to be, we all seem pretty close. Ooh, a learning tool. Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, I think we seem to be pretty close here, and I think that was a good, easy one to get us warmed up here. Question 2: why? Why should we do placement testing? Go. This one may not be as straightforward as it seems, or maybe it is. Yep, right level, set students up for success. I like that. Best fits their needs. Yep. Baseline measure, excellent. Make language learning challenging, okay, but rewarding, good, based on level. Yep, good, good. Range of proficiency, reasonable. Create conditions for students' growth. I like that one. Good, 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 good. Yeah, setting goals for teaching too, and that's another aspect of this question that we will hit. So students don't take a class they need. Students will certainly appreciate that as well. Yeah, so why do we test? Right, there's the obvious here. We want to make sure that students are placed in the correct class. Not too easy, not too hard. There's the less obvious. Professor Winke has been throwing this in here too. Having beginning data on our students as a starting point, exit and end results can be used to measure, demonstrate student progress, and help your program see where you're meeting goals or where you're not. For example, if a lot of your students don't make expected progress, let's say on a measure of writing proficiency, you might look at how much or what kind of writing they're doing in your class and maybe adjust accordingly, or maybe your goals are even a bit too aggressive. There are, of course, reporting concerns as well. As you're likely aware, schools and colleges are under immense pressure and need to prioritize programs. Often that pressure is financial, but also pressure to demonstrate success. Being able to show that you measure progress, ideally in a manner connected to national standards, can really help you make an argument for your program. But having this data is good practice as well. Next question for the chat. How can we placement test? So we've talked about why we're doing it. How can we do it? Natalia, you're sending answers just to me. Adjust your answer to everybody. Luke loves oral proficiency interviews, multiple modes, self-assessments. We'll definitely touch on those too. Oh, we got a second on the OPI, Edina. Writing, good. 4 categories. And one more question. So what are some factors to consider when we are, let's say, okay, so you've decided, or the administration has told you, and I think a lot of you come from small programs, so a lot of this would fall on you. Even if you're not in a small program now, a lot of us will be or have been in one at some point. Okay, so what are some things to consider there? We've talked about how we can do it. Any other factors to consider when you placement test? Go. Like, another way of saying this is, okay, I'm the dean and I tell you to make an assessment program. What do you start worrying about? What keeps you up at night? Number of tests, proficiency levels. Yeah, good, good. Oh, dialect. Yep, we'll definitely talk about, say, heritage speakers. Good, good. I hope everybody's looking at all of these answers here. There's a lot of good ones here. Lots and lots of concerns come up. And some other ones that I haven't seen or seen sort of touched on here. Expense, of course. Official tests can be really expensive, but then there's also time. Creating your own test can take a lot of time and a lot of work. And of course, a lot of us are not testing experts either. So you may say, if you're told to create a test that maybe sounds easy in theory, but I'm sure Professor Winke, if she hasn't told you already, will tell you that it's a lot more complicated than that. And as several of you touched on, there's this whole question of, well, what example to test? There are lots of skills to be covered if you want to get a bigger picture. And what do I mean by that? If you just do oral interviews, for example, well, your heritage speakers are probably going to nail that. They'll be placed in an upper level class. And then when they have to write essays and you're focused on grammar, and I assume Arabic has similar issues, it may start to fall apart there. So if you do, say, a grammar, lexical grammar, and an oral measure, then you start to get even a fuller picture. Do writing, and you'll have even more data there. Good. So let's keep going here. The actual guidelines and placement. I asked you to read about the actual proficiency guidelines for our meeting today. And why? Because they really can be the theoretical and practical connection among all the pieces of a program. They describe functions, things that students can do at each level and each skill at each level. You can use them to backwards design courses. Then you can use them to check that progress. That is ideally what you're doing with these, with the actual guidelines, is you're going back and forth like this and checking. You're checking my course. Did I backward design it to come to my goals? And then I go back and say, hey, are those goals actually being met here? The guidelines can be very useful for curricular design, functions and type of assignments. Make sure you have things that are not too hard or not too easy. There are good suggestions for exercises right in the guidelines. Look at the things that students at a given level can do and make similar exercises. What do I mean by that? One of the skills at the novice level, for example, is listing, just making lists. How many animals are mentioned here? You watched a short video, how many household products were mentioned, how many colors were mentioned, things like that. At the intermediate level, certainly for Russian, asking questions is an important skill. And it's something that novice students really, really struggle with. So we have them ask lots of questions. That's a good thing to do in small groups, for example. Ask each other questions. Come up with 5 questions for a Russian guest who's coming to class today. Advanced can narrate in different tenses. What will you do tomorrow? What will the hero do after the film? What will she be doing tomorrow, for example? And they should actually be incorporated into your course descriptions and goals. This often looks like something by the end of this course, students typically reach a certain level on the actual scale and can do the following things with the language. Keep, again, circling back to this function. By the end of this class, you'll be able to do, and you can pull right from the descriptions because they're very, very specific, and they are language specific ones too. And at the end, I'll have a citation for the Russian and Arabic specific ones. Because they do vary a little bit and they give some really good language specific detail. Your major or your program outcomes as well. I give a couple of examples here. You'll have access to the slides and all of my links later, but this is just an example of middle and high school proficiency targets, the MSU Russian major, for example. One of the really good things about the guidelines too is it's a universal language. If I tell a teacher in California, my student, let's say, is transferring there, oh yeah, he's an intermediate mid at speaking. Right away in that person's head, a picture comes up. Okay, I know what that means there. And I have a pretty good sense of where this person's going to go in my program then. So in terms of placement, during the summer in particular, at MSU, we don't have that many Russian courses, so placement is rather straightforward. But during the summer, we do an awful lot of placement testing. We have to test close to 150 incoming students in 2 days. And we have to place them in one of 7 levels for an 8-week program. So what do? First, we do an oral proficiency interview. Saw a lot of votes in the chat there for OPIs. They're a very powerful instrument. And we do sort of a modified one. Faculty are trained, and the training does 2 things. It allows faculty to not only conduct interviews, but understand the guidelines that much better and how to apply them elsewhere. Oral proficiency interviews, I think, as you know, have this basic outline here. It's kind of a warm-up where I, the tester, am listening to what this person's saying, getting ideas for later. There are all sorts of probes. I'm probing the basement. I know this person is at least so-and-so, and then I'm probing a ceiling. Well, what is their, how high does their proficiency go there? And then I'm checking levels. There's often a role play to sort of confirm that, and then some kind of cool down at the end there. Like we want them to leave on a good note and feeling really, really good. So don't end with some sort of, hypothesis about political events or something like that. End with something that they can do confidently. We also test writing. And writing and speaking complement each other really well. This is a sample prompt from one of our tests. And you will see that the prompts can be designed, again, to get right to the guidelines. An easy one may be, you're going to have a party tomorrow. Make a list. That's a novice function. If they can do that, they are, say, at least novice mid. And then we have ones like this that can really straddle intermediate advanced. If they fulfill this, but not with the detail demanded by the advanced, they may be intermediate, but if they just kill it with detail, then they're probably advanced level. We also do lexical grammatical testing. And in fact, we do two kinds. We do fill in the blank and we do multiple choice. We do multiple choice because of spelling. Well, multiple choice, if you're a little off on spelling, you can still guess. Say, I think the word's spelled this way, but I'm not sure. Whereas, so multiple choice checks passive knowledge very well. And fill in the blanks, of course, there's no guessing there. You either get it or you don't. So they also complement each other well. Here's an example of a fill in the blank, one of our tests. Here's an example of a multiple choice. When we were making our test, we made sure that the multiple choice options were all real possibilities. That's another good question for Professor Winke and all of your instructors, what kind of prompts you should have. But we all use ones that are real forms. At this point, we need to pause for a second. And I really want to acknowledge an important question. And I think this is as applicable for Arabic as it is for Russian. And please correct me if it isn't. As you notice, the oral and writing results are very closely connected to the actual proficiency guidelines. We get outcomes that are stated in terms of the guidelines. The third point that we test grammar, lexical grammar here, is not. And this is something that is debated by specialists. There are purists who would argue against any sort of explicit grammar instruction. And exactly how you understand the nature of proficiency-based language instruction likely depends somewhat on the language that you teach, where you are on that scale. The core question is here, should we teach all languages the same way, or do different languages require different approaches? There was a wonderful debate that broke out. Now, if you had asked me, I would have said a few years ago, but I'm looking at the date and it's 2003 and 2004. But I still remember the days my first teaching job out of college was out of grad school was at Dartmouth, where they were still using the Rossius drill method of giving an infinitive and then pointing at people and making them conjugate it, for example. And this whole question of explicit grammar instruction and drills is still very much alive. In Russian, however, I think most Russian instructors feel that testing this grammar has a certain place. Davidson, for example, I think I cited in here somewhere, uses lots of data, finds that knowledge of grammar is one of the best predictors of success in study abroad, for example. And the guidelines are somewhat related to grammar, especially when we get up to the advanced and certainly the superior levels. We can't have lots of repeating systematic errors. And a lot of heritage speakers, in fact, kind of plateau right here, right up against this grammatical point. And I just mentioned heritage speakers here. And and I just mentioned what I wanted to say about them. Future considerations. Other things, and some of these were mentioned in the chat. We've also begun a student self-assessment. It's based on the can-do statements, but we started adjusting it for Russian. It's still under development. We use it every year, but haven't really had a chance to look at how responses line up with testing data. And there's a citation there if you want to see more about that. But Professor Winke, if I'm correct, self-assessments tend to be pretty good indicators of proficiency, aren't they, overall?
Yes, especially when you consider their cost, that they're very cost effective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's one of our longer term projects. Some other things that we might try to measure at some point. Cultural competence. You know, we haven't even mentioned the World Readiness Standards at all, the so-called 5 C's of communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities. There are other things like motivation and confidence, you know, things that are not measured by the language proficiency test that we've mentioned here. And if you get a free moment, if Dmitrii hasn't told you all about his work, this is his territory right here. And what do I mean by that? For example, at Middlebury, every summer, we have students who, according to the measures, make very little or no progress. Let's say they come in at intermediate high and they leave at intermediate high. Yet we know that they have improved greatly over the 8 weeks that they've been studying. And this is particularly high. Look at the right side of the screen here. This is particularly possible at the higher levels of the actual scale due to its inverted pyramid nature. And what that means is you go from novice mid to novice high a lot faster than you go, let's say, from intermediate mid to intermediate high. And certain jumps like intermediate high to advanced low are very, very difficult. And there are learners who just never make it out of, say, intermediate. A former director of the Russian school used to call intermediate mid in particular a big swamp because so many students got stuck there. Final advice. When you have to come up with your own placement assessment program, take it slowly. Don't rush. Plan well. Keep the big picture in mind. What is possible for my program? What does my program really need? Investigate what colleagues are doing. Share resources. That is, see what is actually out there and don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. For Russian instructors, if you're not aware of ACTR, which I think you all are, but if you're not, you should be. And there's its address there. And I hope there's a similar organization for Arabic. And I would ask, that your instructors give you that. And let me just put some key resources on here. I want to do a plug for the language specific guidelines, because one of the things that they do is they give actual copies. They are actual examples. Oh, you want to know what, let's say, what an intermediate low in speaking looks like? Boom, here's a recording. You want to know what intermediate high in writing looks like? Boom, here's an example here. And they're really, really good ways of checking the actual guidelines with real examples. And again, going back and forth like that. I hope I haven't gone too much over my 20 minutes. I want to thank you all for your attention, as we say in Russian, and I would really welcome some comments, questions, and discussion in my remaining 8 minutes.
That's great. Yes, we'll make it a good 8 minutes.
So I don't know what kind of, if you just have a fire away procedure or how you.
They can put their questions in the chat. Sometimes there's a little bit of a wait time for them to get those out. But meanwhile, they can also just ask any questions out loud. You can raise your hand or just jump in.
Svetlana, I think I saw.
I have a question about actful rubrics and grammar, and particularly tenses, because I'm still figuring out how this requirement novice, intermediate, and advanced, because it can be simple task, but if students provide in the whole paragraph, not one sentence, and this is novice, for example, can do, but this is still not novice level because paragraph is more like advanced. But how this You mentioned grammar and actful rubrics. If you can just clarify a little bit more how to navigate that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, and you mentioned, I think you just mentioned every sticking point there is for Russian language assessment, because there is, of course, another thing that the guidelines will say is, can be understood by a sympathetic native speaker, can be understood by a native speaker used to dealing with foreigners, with non-native speakers, excuse me. And you also mentioned the famous paragraph, because a paragraph, according to the guidelines, is not just 6 sentences stuck together. They have to be somehow connected with an opening, and there has to be a clear opening, conclusion, structure, and connection from sentence to sentence. And these are all factors in that kind of consideration. Basically, by the time we get to the end of the novice level, we are making sentences most of the time. By the time we get to the end of the intermediate, we are making paragraphs most of the time. Again, but not always, because once we hit always, we're into the next level. And then by the advanced level, we are, again, speaking in paragraphs. And this is another catch, because there are some people who, in fact, in their native languages might just test at intermediate high. They just don't say a lot. And it's another one of the sort of criticisms that has been perhaps shows the need for other testing mechanisms as well. I have this feeling I'm dancing around your question and not getting to it, but to the grammar part, I think it's this question of, is it understood or not? And I can think of a lot of our teaching meetings where we look at samples and kind of pull them apart and say, okay, it's slow, but yes, I can understand it, therefore it fits the criteria. And you'll find that even certified testers disagree about certain pieces. I would say, as you're learning them, rely on those examples on the website really closely. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
I don't think I see everybody, so just speak up or throw something in chat if you are so inclined. Natalia.
Hi, Jason. I have a question.
Sure.
Particularly about this swamp area where students are stuck. I noticed that everyone has difficult issues. Some people have issues with speaking. Some people have issues with writing. Some people have issues with grammar. So it's all different. So, and if we have a group and we want to move them up, what is the best way to differentiate? I don't know. Is it clear what I was just talking about? Yep. I think I was a little vague.
I think what you're asking is, okay, I have a group that is for the most part at intermediate mid, and I want to pull them out of intermediate mid. Again, this is one of these places where you go to the guidelines and you say, okay, well, what kinds of things are advanced, is expected of the advanced level? And for Russian, you'll see, for example, it is detailed narration in all 3 tenses. So in Russian in particular, we're going to do a lot of future tense, which, as we know, is very difficult for native speakers of English to get to specifically getting the aspect down. This is where aspect really comes into play, because it's a biggie in past tense narration and in future tense narration. But you look at the assignments for advanced and make sure you're working in a lot of those. One of the things you don't want to do if you have students at the, say, the intermediate mid-level that you just mentioned, is giving them easy things that are designed for the novice level. They're not challenged by that at all. We want to be at level and above. We don't want to be too high. We're not giving them superior level stuff, but we're looking at the next sub-level, next 2 sub-levels, and kind of pulling them along like that. Being aware that that particular jump from intermediate mid, so intermediate mids are capable of doing advanced level some of the time. Intermediate highs do advanced level almost all of the time. So you can see that kind of progression there as well. And of course, to get advanced low, you're doing it all of the time. And for Russian, that may be the hardest jump. And we have some students that just don't make it. I hope I answered your question. Isa.
I actually have a question about the difference between advanced and superior level, and also kind of the question is touching the next level, distinguished. So because I have a few colleagues who are teaching Russian in different schools, and they tried to take OPI, and they failed, like not failed completely, but they didn't show superior level there. Although they are pretty confident and they are highly motivated and they had months to prepare. So maybe you can give some advice how to help such students. And also like maybe there are some like tools that we can use, because sometimes it seems that the testers want to see distinguished level, not superior, because superior can be reached during the language program, or maybe like after this graduate students finish master program.
And Isa, are you asking about students, or are you asking about?
Well, people who take, yes, like no, like any people who want to take OPI and get a superior level there. So because they are stuck not at the intermediate level, they are stuck at the advanced level.
Mm-hmm. And this is another very, very difficult one. Probably the reason that I called intermediate to advanced the trickiest one for Russian is just because we have so few who actually make it that far to superior. This is, of course, one of the reasons for the existence of the flagship program, the stated goal of getting language students to very advanced levels of language proficiency. Because by the time we get to the superior level, we cannot have any repeating grammatical mistakes. You're still allowed to make some, but they can't be systematic ones. That is, if the tester notices right away that I can't handle, or I mess up my future tense, for example, right away, there's no way I'm going to get to superior. And this is multiple paragraphs. This is a command of all sorts of speculation. And it's a lot of the issue there is also thinking as well. That's one of the ways I've always seen it, is it's, whereas the advanced, again, is looking for just extended narration, superior is looking for the kind of the what if, the hypotheses on very, very difficult topics. So I think superior is going to require a lot of reading of contemporary events. A lot of the questions there tend to revolve around contemporary events. Do you have all of the vocabulary for specific problems, crime rates, global warming, international relations, and things like that. So a lot of it is grammar, but those particular kinds of constructions too. And by the time we get to superior and then distinguished, you have to have a really good feel for different registers. And I wonder, I think Arabic has a similar but not exactly the same kind of issue where, there's one of the things I might have to do is give a formal presentation. Well, that language in Russian is very different from, let's have a conversation about what I did yesterday. It requires not only different vocabulary, but certainly different constructions and a whole different way of viewing the way I approach the language. So these registers become an issue too. And it's 7:30. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Professor Winke, Liz, and Dima to give you my email address. And I would say, please don't look at this as the end, but if you have other questions, anything at all, feel free to email me. I'm on email all the time and love to talk about this kind of stuff.
Thank you so much, Jason. And we'll give him a virtual or physical round of applause.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful seeing everybody. And I'm going to hang out and listen to Ayman. Ayman, is it okay if I listen to you?
Fabulous.
I'll turn my camera off and listen. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, and what we'll do now is just stretch a little bit in your chair. Feel free to stand up and do what you need. And while you do that, Liz is going to introduce Ayman.
All right, so tonight's session is special, not only because we have two really wonderful guest lecturers, but just as Jason is on Dima's dissertation committee, Ayman is also on my dissertation committee. So I am honored to welcome Dr. Ayman Mohamed to speak with us tonight. He is one of very few Arabic applied linguists out there who focus on second language acquisition. I know we've got a couple of people here as well, Alette and Mariah, who are pursuing degrees in that, but we need more, so you guys should all think about maybe this session has piqued your interest in how to improve language learning, particularly in Arabic. So Dr. Mohamed is interested in vocabulary teaching and learning, and he's used a very high-powered technique called eye tracking, where you use a high-speed camera in order to see where participants are looking on a screen, and you can use that to gain a lot of insight into the reading process as well as into vocabulary acquisition. On the side, he's also very invested in pedagogy. He's taught every level of class at Michigan State University. And he also was doing hybrid teaching classes before COVID. So he's a great resource in that regard. So without further ado, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Ayman Mohamed.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my mini classroom here. So let me share my screen. So today I'm going to talk in general about vocabulary growth and assessment in the language classroom, with some implication for Arabic, of course, in the way. But most of the time we're trying to speak generally in language teaching. And the agenda for the talk, we're going to talk about vocabulary knowledge. What do we mean by when we learn vocabulary, and what are some strategies to teach? And we move on to assessment. So vocabulary knowledge, as we know, is fundamental to all language use, and it's a crucial part of language learning. Even anecdotally, teachers, practitioners, students, they reach out to you and ask, how can you give me some recommendation to how to make sense of all this vocabulary, how to learn more vocabulary. So it's a crucial issue for learners and teachers. So achieving lexical knowledge is a powerful predictor of language learning's proficiency and academic achievement, and it's even sometimes more important than syntactic knowledge, which means like grammar, in achieving effective communication. Of course, you need grammar for communication, but without words, you cannot put things, you cannot convey your ideas. What is involved in learning a word? When we say that the learners have learned some words, what do we mean? We don't only talk about form, it's a whole continuum of form, meaning, and use. Form is the first thing that you learn, how the word looks like. Then you learn more about meaning. And with more repetition, you learn more and more about the deep meaning and the use in different contexts. So it's a continuum of learning. It's not only, and there is a famous diagram of what is involved in learning a word, but just for the sake of time, I did not include it here. And you can take this resource, Nation 2013, to learn more about what is involved in learning a word. There is a difference between the receptive and productive knowledge. And by receptive, let's say if you are learning Arabic and you see a word in Arabic and you recognize the meaning, that's receptive knowledge. if you are given a sentence or a word in English and you are asked to retrieve the form of the word or the word in Arabic, that's productive knowledge. Okay. So how do we move from receptive knowledge to productive knowledge? It's a cumulative process, incremental. It doesn't happen in a day or two. Learners increase the number and the quality of learning words over time. And it must include increased and spaced exposure. By spaced exposure, we mean the learners should see the word many, many times, let's say 20 times, but not in 2-3 days. You could see the word 20 times over a semester, for example. That's spaced. We need spaced exposure. Incidental and intentional. We need both. They complement each other. Not all the time we are learning, we intend to learn words. Sometimes we learn words by chance, incidentally. And these two forms, these two strands of meaning complement each other. Extensive reading is a good resource of vocabulary development. Many programs implement these through some sort of graded readers for learners to develop their vocabulary over time. And there is a great, huge amount of research on extensive reading in vocabulary development. The key in vocabulary development is engagement. Any activity that leads to engagement and involvement with the word leads to more or better outcome. There are a lot of models that describe what are some effective tools for learning vocabulary. And one of them, only just one of them, is Nation and Web 2011 technique feature analysis. By this model or this hypothesis characterizes the types of tasks, the teaching tasks you do in class, the teaching activities you do in class. You can yourself determine if they are more or less effective by looking at such a model. Does your teaching activity trigger motivation, noticing, retrieval, generation, retention? And this is like, just for the sake of time, I'm not going into deep detail about this, but you can also read about it. It could be a good resource for teachers to gauge the effectiveness of the teaching activities they do for vocabulary. And if a certain task is achieving most of these, that means it's an like effective, more effective task. Okay. So moving on, what are some principles for teaching vocabulary? Nation proposes a principled and balanced approach in a vocabulary development program. It's not only about giving students the vocabulary on the board. It's a whole process of that integrates form, meaning, input, output, and fluency. All of these, like each segment, include like 25% of teaching time. While you are doing this over the semester, you are touching upon some essential elements for teaching: spaced repetition and retrieval, pushed output. By pushed output, you are pushing students to produce the words, not only input, not only receiving the words, they are producing them. Content and language integration. That means you have a context. You are teaching your vocabulary in context and not only in isolation. Okay, so to process some of this information, let's brainstorm some ideas based on your classroom or your teaching. What are some of your preferred strategies in teaching new vocabulary with giving you some pedagogical rationale for that? Let's take some of your ideas. If you have something to share, you can put it on the chat box or simply speak out. We can discuss. Okay. Is there a certain way we can show up the chat? Sometimes the chat is not showing for me.
It might be with your screen sharing.
I understand, yeah. It interferes with sharing, yeah.
Maybe stop your share temporarily and then.
Okay. Yes, right. Okay, flashcards. Context is important. Images. Yeah, we're talking about elementary levels. Talk about myself. Yes, personalize learning is very important. Telling a story. Context. Yes. Matching, using, writing. So yeah, the incremental use is very important. So you are first gradually presenting the vocabulary. You are giving them form, then meaning, then use. Yes, that's the progress. Grouped around one topic. Yep, very good. So there could be theme-based approach. Yeah, reading, daily reading. Yes, extensive reading. Real life cases, repetition and practice. Yes, that's pretty much like you are covering the big ideas about learning vocabulary. Moving on, trying to share again. Yes, images and tasks. These are some key ideas. Okay. So now, if we move to testing, when we talk about testing vocabulary, we ask about why, the purpose of the test, why we are testing. Are you doing for placement, or are you doing for testing the achievement of your students? The population, the education and context, what type of students are they? Like, what are their levels? Are they college? Are they K-12? Description of the type of the knowledge that you are testing, whether you are concerned with the breadth or depth or receptive productive knowledge. So all of these are consideration to think about before you do vocabulary testing. In your reading, you saw something about types of testing, which includes like discrete versus embedded. By discrete testing, we mean we focus on the single words, only the isolated words, multiple choice, matching, sentence completion, gap filling, and translation. You are giving scores based on true or false. You are giving the answers. But in the embedded, we can have reading comprehension, speaking, writing. One example of this is the IELTS exam, which has like speaking and writing. In the speaking and writing sections, they have a clear component on vocabulary, range, and use in the grading of the testing. Okay, so what are some considerations in classroom vocabulary assessment? It should be meaningful, communicative context rather than decontextualized. So we are preferring, as you all like shared in the comments, context, theme, task-based. All of these are more favorable in testing, assessing vocabulary use. I'm more concerned with how my students are using the vocabulary, rather than they know the vocabulary, check, 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 final mark. This is not the idea. It should be based on the course material. So you are testing what you are teaching to give an indication of how they are learning. There is always a greater use called for use of embedded comprehensive context-dependent assessment of lexical knowledge. Yes, we need both types of assessment, but it depends on when and how you are doing it. Over the semester, you need both. Sometimes you need just a quick quiz, a quick vocabulary quiz. You can do the discrete one. Later on in the semester, you need to see the achievement, performance. You can employ some embedded testing. Again, match assessment with instruction, employ multiple measures of vocabulary assessment, because no test can tap into all types of vocabulary knowledge. What are the types of the vocabulary knowledge? We talked about receptive knowledge, productive knowledge. There is a difference between size of vocabulary and the quality of vocabulary. Make your assessment meaningful, valid, and reliable. Be transparent about providing your students with the necessary information of how their vocabulary knowledge will be assessed. So it's not, so it should not be a secret that, okay, I'm testing this way, or you're gonna have a word bank, you're gonna have a fill in the gap without a word bank. So this is an important aspect here. In class, practice common vocabulary testing formats. So you should be, over the semester, students should be familiar with the type of tasks you are doing, so they are not surprised in the testing. Okay, so depending on time, we were planning for breakout rooms for this if we have time. If we don't, we can do a general discussion. How we are doing on time, Liz?
I think it might actually be good to open up the floor for a general discussion right now.
Right. Yeah, I'm leaning toward this too. So I will just ask my question here and keep it open for everyone to participate. So let's say on the level elementary, beginners, and we have target vocabulary, like hotel, airport, museum, to spend. All of these are like some of our learners, let's say some of our learners have seen these words before in the second language, like in Arabic or Russian. Some are not familiar at all with these words. And we want to create teaching tasks or activities that range in learning effect. By this, I mean, we want to think of two teaching tasks. One is more effective and one is less effective. And we want to answer the question why you think so. Let's talk about this part first, about the designing the teaching task. Okay, we have a question. Yes?
Well, I'm not sure that it's a question. I just have an idea
how
we can. I think so as you mentioned, some of these words can be like some of these words students can know already. So we can start with matching task, for instance, to offer them an opportunity to review some words and also like I will see what they remember, what they don't remember. And after that, we could, like the students who are confident, they could give definitions to the words that other students don't know, or maybe translate some words. And the next step, we can probably create some situations or like start with sentences also, because in Russian it's important, for instance, to spend, like it's very important to mention grammar and to indicate what cases require this verb. And after that, so from the sentence, we could go to the work with a map, or maybe with a text where they should fill the blanks, for instance. And after that, answer the questions about the text using the words.
Great. That's a big lesson plan. So you're mainly talking about first, a form-focused approach. You're focusing on form. You are giving specific instruction on the form of the words, and that's important. Then moving gradually to meaning and use. Okay. Anyone has another idea for another teaching approach to the same vocabulary that would be more or less effective?
When I look at that list of vocabulary, a story comes to mind. Those are words that are easily worked together into a story. And so with a little bit of illustration, you could tell a story or have students read a story, depending on whether you wanted your focus to be on oral or the written, but tell a story that would put these words into context, and then give students an opportunity to go back to that text and say, oh, so this word must mean, and have them sort of figure out. You could then do Isa's matching activity after the fact instead of before, to have students work together to try and figure out, what can they learn from context. And then you get them using that meta language too, of like asking each other what things mean. Right. Context and story and retelling is kind of, you are combining pushed output. The output of the student is very important. So they can read the story. Let's say we can combine the past tense about in a story. One, a young man and his friends, or a group of friends, made a trip. And you can embed these into your story while students are already familiar with the past tense. So your main, as if you are recycling the past tense, and in the way of that, you are introducing the new vocabulary. And I kind of did something like that in a work that's still under review, that we had a story of two versions. In one version of the story, students read the text and answered multiple choice questions on the story. Then they were asked to retell the story to their classmates, and finally to the teacher as a whole, to the class as a whole. This is one group. The other group were asked to read the same story, but in the place of the target words, there were gaps. And then they were given a word bank on the other side with explanation of the new vocabulary. They were asked to match the words to the gaps, considering that they haven't seen the words before. This is a new experience. And then when they did that, after they did that, they retold the story with classmates and then with the teacher. So we have two conditions right now: reading plus multiple choice, reading plus fill in the gap. Which one do you think did more learning?
I would say the reading and fill in the gap, because the fill in the gap requires them to do a little bit more reading and to be exposed to the language in context again, whereas the multiple choice gives a little bit less input after the reading.
Exactly, yeah. This is exactly what happened because there was engagement, involvement. Students were involved with the words themselves, so they had more attention. Okay, so yes, for the sake of time, we need. I think we're gonna close here and just. Okay, and just to end up to show what happened afterwards, we did, let's say, where are we? Okay, so in this research, after students did the two tasks, this is the kind of testing that we did, a vocabulary knowledge scale, okay? And it would give us an idea of the quality of learning that happened. It's self-reported testing. It's one of the common ways of learning about students' outcome. So I have to stop here. And of course, you have the resource and the PowerPoint for further examination. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ayman. And I love this slide in particular about the vocabulary knowledge scale. It's really a nice way to think about vocabulary knowledge and moving people along from implicit to explicit. Kind of dovetails back with Sean Lowen's talk. Thank you so much today to both of our guest speakers. And we're at 8 o'clock, so we'll end here. Remember, we have office hours this Friday at 5 p.m., so please feel free to come. If you can't come to office hours, we'll be there from 5 to 6. And if you're with us, we'll stay longer to address all of your needs. Then Liz, Dmitrii, and I will be logging in at 5:45 on Monday. So if you have any preliminary questions before we start at 6 o'clock, you're welcome to join us at that time as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.